So I want this to be sort of very informal and more just a matter of getting some of your very interesting stories that no doubt come out in a well, in a more informal way, but getting that on tape. Mm-hmm. But just feel free to not worry about the fact that a tape is running. Well, a lot of the questions that I have are just from my personal interest, and that is, I know that you studied with Sonia and that you knew her over the course of many years. But how old were you when you first began to study with her?
I think I was probably about 13.
Okay, so you were fairly young.
Yeah, 13 or 14. Yeah, and I studied with her till through high school.
Okay. So can you remember the very first time you met her? Or is there not one early meeting that stands out?
I really don't remember the first time. I'm because you know, in the
would you have
auditioned
for her? Like, would you have come to audition for her, or would she?
I can't. She used to find out about
people.
I've
heard that before. Actually,
I don't want to make up a story. So all I know is that I don't know if I called her or my mother called her, but she definitely knew who I was. Mm-hmm. And I started taking. I remember, a lot of stories. I started taking violin lessons with her, and it was Saturday morning, and it was, I remember it was $15 a lesson, which, it was outrageous, and I don't know how my mom and dad did it. That's why I'm here in Winnipeg taking care of them now, because...
It's payback time.
Well, really big time. But, and then I was taking piano lessons from... And when I started taking with her, she was new, and she wasn't that, she was so not overbearing, but I think I'm going to have to move my car, because I couldn't find a place in the, what if I just give whoever, I couldn't find a place on the street, and I was going back and forth, to hell with it. I'm going to put it in the...
It's one of the hazards of here, I'll just put this.
Yeah, put it on.
Really fluctuates with when the classes end
at
the school, obviously. So,
anyways, first impressions. I think I might have seen Mrs. Eckhart at some musical function or a symphony concert or something, so I knew what she looked like. But I do not remember. I remember what my mother just dying at the moment, but if you think she's the best, fine. She wasn't. She was so new to town, and she was so dynamic, and there was the sort of tradition in the town for teachers was there were. I'm sure I'll miss out some of the ones I remember were Anne and Vic Palmer. And they were a lot of the North End kids, the Ukrainian kids, wonderful, incredible talents. Then there was John Waterhouse, whom had been here forever, and then there were the person that I studied with was his name was Frank Simons, and he was the harpist and a violinist in the symphony. So, and they'd been around for years, so an upstart sort of middle-aged lady was, it just added some pepper, and everybody was sort of out of joint. Nevertheless, however we came to meet, I'm sure that my mother probably called, or I called, and I'm positive I'm not positive, but I think she probably had heard of me or saw my name as winning a contest or something. Anyway, in any case, she, right from the beginning, she really took over my total education, and I was I was 2 years ahead of myself in school, so and I was just totally involved in music. I'd wanted a flute, and I took a couple of flute lessons from Dirk Kietbos. I wanted to take singing lessons. My first job was as contralto soloist at Young United Church.
Oh.
And I studied with Cara Wilson for a while, and then Nina Dempsey, who was very, she went through all of the singers here. And then I studied piano with Frank Simons, and then I studied with Leonard Heaton, who was just the most wonderful old guy. I just adored him. A very British tradition. And after I'd studied with Mrs. Eckhardt for about I think it might have been a year, I got to know Deidre Irons, and I also got to know, because it was my first year at Gordon Bell, I got to know Ross Petty, who's married to Karen Kane now. And Ross, we were involved in school musicals, and Ross took piano lessons from Mrs. Eckhardt. And so, I can't remember exactly, but there was this, so I asked Mrs. Eckhardt if I could take piano lessons with her too. And in fact, I did. So then Saturdays it was really...
So it was violin and piano.
That's right.
Okay.
And and she knew I was, she said, oh, you do have to play. And she would call me Gwenna, because she said Gwen Thompson is just not a, Gwenna. She would always, and like,
it doesn't have any pizzazz.
No, I have at home, which I will find for you, and I'll Xerox it. I remember she always gave me presents. She gave me a record. She wanted me to play Cacciaturian Concerto, and she bought me the music. I remember it still. It's orange. She wrote something beautiful, and I've lost it, or one of my students took it as a present themselves. And she wrote, for Christmas time, she wrote a bizarre, harmonically, something I wasn't used to, O Tannenbaum. And then she wrote me a happy birthday for one of my birthdays, which I will try and look for you and Xerox them, because they're so bizarre. The harmonies and stuff.
So the happy birthday arrangement was written for you?
Yeah. Have you got it?
Well, I've heard about it. I think we may have the music here.
It was my 16th birthday, and she wrote, I've got it at home for Gwenna and so.
Oh, so you would have the original?
Yeah. Okay,
so if we do have a copy here at the
I'll
Foundation...
look,
yeah. That's...
it's just interesting to see. I might be maudlin because I'm older, but I would come here, and she would have such an imagination, and I just could feel that what she was telling me was really good, because she didn't just say, oh, play beautifully or you sound good. She had principles, and she had ideas that I could tell when she was trying to teach me little things, that, I needed to have information if I wanted to get better, and she had already sorted out that information, So it was fabulous. As I kept on playing and singing and stuff, she would say, you're doing too much. You can't practice enough. You can't, the usual. And in fact, my husband's grandmother studied with Clara Schumann, and we have a whole bunch of letters that Clara Schumann wrote to my husband's grandmother. She was a very good pianist. And I tell you, it's the same things that Mrs. Eckhardt said to me. You've got to take a walk, refresh your mind. You can't go off cavorting to parties. And it's
right.
A teacher's nightmare that you try and get your kids. But I remember one day she was particularly frustrated with me, and she put down your violin, and she took me into her bedroom, and she had this. It was a low bed, single bed, and it had just a gazillion pillows on it. And she said, okay, now pick the pillow you really like. Take your time. What pillow strikes you as the one you like the most? So I hummed and hawed, picked one, and I've used this on several of my students over the years too. It was magic to me. Anyways, then what pillow do you like next? So I had the first one against my chest, then I packed the next one. What's the next one you like? And I was packing, and I got to about 7 pillows, and the one that I liked the first, as I was going with, it fell from me first. And she said, you know, you have to remember in music, you like violin, you like piano, you like singing, you like, but she said the thing that you love the most is going to go away from you first.
Oh.
Is that brilliant or what?
Wisdom.
I mean, I tell you, I mean, I just trusted her and believed her so much because I knew that she was she gave. I mean, the lessons were expensive and stuff, but it wasn't. It was a total education. It just wasn't come in, an hour later, goodbye. You know, and so I really. She was like a mentor, or
Right.
she was a violin mother. The same as I went on to my other teachers. Joseph Gingold was a violin father to me. You know, I mean, my parents, I love them and stuff, but there's, you know, when I decided to get married, in fact, I called Mr. Gingold before I called my mom and dad because he was my, you know, sort of my violin father figure, and I always thought of Mrs. Eckhart as, you know, such a strong influence. And I'm a very determined, sort of stubborn person, and I really admired her, the relentlessness that she approached. She rarely got fed up. I mean, I remember her. Well, she wanted me to play chamber music, so she organized a quartet, and I don't think we paid anything, but it was with another one of her students whose name is Wanda Conrad, and I don't know, Wanda lives in Kansas somewhere now, but a cellist who had come here from Vancouver who played in the symphony, or Lynn Rudiak, and a girl by the name of Phyllis Wedding, who's played in the National Arts Center Orchestra. She got us together, and I know what she coached us on. We did one of the Borodin quartets, the one Bangles, the Hunt of Mozart, and the Lark of Haydn, and we did her string quartet. I mean, those I remember, just her just being absolutely fastidious, you know. Everything had to be quaint. This had to be, the sound had to be, and I really remember that. And with Ross, when Ross was my accompanist, and I mean, we spent hours getting him. I mean, he's still too. We're still friends. He's still, when we see each other, you know, he still knows. This is 50 years, 40 years. He still can play that, the Symphony of Spaniel by Lalo. He still can play the orchestra reduction. You know.
Who is Ross?
Ross Petty.
Okay.
Yeah. And he always kept in touch with me, and he's another one of, and you should perhaps, I mean, he's married to Karen Kane, and they're a wonderful couple.
Fascinating.
But he studied piano with her, and he was sort of, I mean, we were sort of I don't want to say weirdos, but the sense that I felt when I came to study with Mrs. Eckhart, while Deidre Irons was studying with her, and like, she insisted that Deidre quit school and stuff, so Deidre was doing homeschool, and it was just too bizarre for Winnipeg. You know what I mean? And so we always felt like if we didn't really do well, then people would say, well, you see, just a bunch of hot air, and she's not, you know.
Right.
It was a very funny feeling. And
like there was this sense of duty and
that's right.
to live up to what she was
right.
imparting to you,
That's right.
almost.
And she resented that her works weren't being played a lot, and she shared it with all of us, I think. I mean, it was very frustrating for her because nobody. I mean, she talked about herself some, but nobody realized the legacy that she was bringing to her as a teacher and a performer, because she really wanted to be a composer. Anyway, so I remember the Baba O Rum, and the having my first, sitting in this room now. I mean, can you imagine that? My parents are wonderful, but my grandfather and grandmother, they were immigrants. My mom's, they were from Germany, from Prussia, and my dad's family, I mean, they're 7 or 8 generations Canadian, but farmers, migrant farmers. And I mean, I had, I mean, I didn't feel like I didn't know anything, but my mother gave me the desire to want to learn and sort of educate myself in things that she had no idea about.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming in here was, I mean, it just was great. And looking at the pictures, just having a feeling of history,
Mm-hmm.
because I had from John Waterhouse a little bit. But after I left Winnipeg, one of his students was a very wonderful English violinist called Freddie Grinke, and he's now dead, but he was from Winnipeg. He taught at the Royal Academy, had a great career. And we studied with John Waterhouse. Both of us did, but he studied with him 50 years before I did. So that kind of,
Right.
and to walk into this house was just, it
Mm-hmm.
was really, I can't say awe-inspiring because no 16-year-old is awe-inspired, but I felt
It was
pretty
very much a taste
lucky.
of another world.
Yeah.
That you sort
Yeah.
of felt like, yeah, I'm having some of Europe
Yeah, and
suddenly here in Winnipeg.
she was a great influence on me and continues to be, although, lots of times I think, well, where did I come up with that idea? Oh yeah, it was something Mrs. Eckhart said.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize
Mhm.
what you're being given.
Right.
But when you start spouting it out, you say, I'm not a genius. This couldn't be just me, I'm remembering something. But,
Yeah.
and I have to say that how are we doing?
Yep.
When I finished grade 12, I was really not a nice. I mean, I was like, I have a son, and I know. I mean, I'm very understanding of him because I was really a rebel. I wanted to. Winnipeg was I wanted to go and see the world,
Mhm.
and I was. Mrs. Eckhart was. She said, you've got to stay here because you can come every day and I can prepare you and for all these competitions and stuff. And I just didn't feel that, I mean, I knew she knew more than me, but I just did not feel that I could come here every day and get something out of it. It was so intense. And also my parents are of the generation that you simply you had to go to university and get a job. I mean,
Mhm.
if you were lucky enough to go to university.
Mhm.
And my mom just, she really thought sitting around here, I was subbing in the orchestra, I was singing, I was
Mhm.
pretty much, I thought, boy, life is not bad. I have a great expression, but I can't put it on the tape, so because it's a swear. No, I'll tell you.
You can.
I felt that I was Queen Shit of Turd Hill. You know what I mean? And my
Yes.
mother just, she was saying, no, I don't want her hanging around this house. So in fact, then I did. I'd met somebody at a summer, the National Youth Orchestra. I mean, Joe Gingold, who taught at the Indiana University, and
Mhm.
and he had said, if you ever go to university, I'd love to teach you. And so I had to tell Mrs. Eckhart that I was going away, and she took it very, very badly. I think her pride was because she could have given me so much more. It just wasn't the right place and the right time, where it had been for the 4 years before that. I mean,
So she, this is after you had graduated from high school.
Yeah.
She very much wanted you to stay here and come for mentoring,
yeah,
like on a
that's
daily
right, that's
basis,
right.
and
yeah, because I mean, I mean, there was so much in this house, and that she could bring me into my life, but I didn't have the chance to go out and make the mistakes and have the bad judgment so that I could be as experienced as her. I mean, you know how you want if somebody trusted me, you do exactly what they want, but you're going to make mistakes anyway. But she did have, a lot more to say. Anyways, I called on and off, and Dr. Eckhart was, I mean, he was always wonderful. to me, and he said, Sonia was, and I know she loved you, you loved her, but he sort of tried to make it nice. Anyways, then she died, and I kept up correspondence with Dr. Eckhardt. I came over to visit him when I would come to Winnipeg. When he was in Vancouver, he'd come to our house for dinner, and my kids had to call him Uncle Ferdy, and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and he always sent me, when Sonia's records came out, and he sent me the book he wrote. I mean, so it was wonderful that way.
So, what were the years that you would have studied with her between when and when?
I think probably 1960 or 61 to 65.
Okay. And then between 65 and when she died, were there any occasions where you were back in Winnipeg that you would have seen her? Or spoken with her, or were things just, lying a little low at that point?
I think I remember myself probably in my imagination, but I think I probably saw her at things when I would come home after, at Christmas time, or I would call her, and I think she was still very hurt. I mean, I understand. I wish she was here now so I could, tell her how much that she gave me, but you just have to get experience, and you have to make your own mistakes. She wanted to protect all of her students. Probably, I'm speaking just really personally, and she felt such she really loved me. I've been teaching now for 30 years. I know there's some students that you really love, and you just know that you can help. However, it takes about 8 or 9 years of teaching when you realize that you can't do that. And I don't think she'd been teaching long. I mean, I don't think she'd experienced that, and she never put 2 and 2 together, that the reason she knew so much and was so simple, because she was here, there, everywhere. She was pushed around, she was moved, so you know what I mean. So it's almost
that from what you're describing, she her ideal for her students was the antithesis of her own musical education, which I mean, she was at the Paris Conservatoire for a few years, but other than that was extremely ad hoc.
That's
It was sort of her mother teaching her at certain points, and her just learning on her own. And I mean, she never had a formal education herself in terms of school.
That's right.
Ever, and it's almost like
as if you're absolutely right.
And like you say, it's sort of the opposite.
That's
but
right.
It's almost what she never had. She wanted to
That's
sort
right.
of put.
And I mean, she could bring everything that I needed into this house, but that's so inward. I mean,
it's a little bit stifling in some
really
regards.
is, yeah.
As liberating as it is,
that's right.
There's also the other side
and
to
I
it.
always played, if I had to do auditions and stuff, I always played a piece of hers, and I felt that I still loved her as much. I still do today, or but when she died, I felt I'm really awful that because we were just warming up. I think Uncle Ferdy was trying to
being the mediator.
Yeah, because he really he
could probably see with a little bit more distance than she could.
I have to say they both really really liked my mother. My mother was a school teacher, and she spoke German and French, and they really, it was, they weren't sort of lifting me out of a bad situation.
Right.
They were adding to something that was already good.
Right.
So it was, reminiscing, when Dr. Eckhart came to, when I brought my husband the first time, I said, you've got to, my husband is sort of a blue blood. He's European and comes from a long, distinguished line of bankers and things like that. And of course, they lost everything. And also, he had a fabulous musical history with his grandmother. And so I called Dr. Oh, you've got to come over. So we came over, and as we were talking, and I think it was here that night, Oliver, my husband, starts to learn about, like, if he's, well, he's a psychiatrist, so he learns about what questions to ask, you know, like if we're having to have dinner with a violinist, to say, well, what kind of violin do you play, or tell me about the painting, and can you tell me more about Gramatté, it was in this. So Dr. Eckhart started to talk about how he had, Gramatté had, what do you call people who, mentors, you know, and in fact, he looked at Oliver and he said, what's your last name again, or something, and Oliver said Robineau, and he said, is it the Robineaus from Hamburg? And in fact, a banking firm that my father-in-law's brother and uncle ran were mentors of Gramatté. Now that's bizarre.
Wow.
Isn't that ridiculous? I mean, and it is. It's there. It is. And so then, of course, that really made Dr. Eckhart feel that that I might have not gotten full weight out of Mrs. Eckhart, but at least my nose was pointed in the right direction when I'm showing somebody to marry. You know.
You're on the right path.
Yeah.
Wow. What does it make you feel like to come to the house now at this point with all of these memories from the past? Is there anything specific that overtakes you? Or?
Well, the piano overtook me the other day. The fact that this rubber plant, it's the same one, but it's 45 years older than it was, and it's, I mean, my favorite thing was that table, and just all the trinkets, you know. At my lessons, Mrs. Eckhart, if she wanted to get me to play a certain way, you know, she'd take out one of those little Ukrainian things, or, you know, one of her little roosters, and just show me the filigree, and she said, that's the kind of quality we want, you know, this type of stuff. So I feel...
They became teaching tools.
Yeah, I don't feel nostalgic. I feel that it's this place is still incredibly alive. Mm-hmm. You know, that's how I felt. I was disappointed that her room with all her bed with her pillows was gone, because that's what that's right. The
that
only
was a
thing.
very vivid.
But I just have such an overwhelming appreciation for what she. And in fact, I can't in her way, but I've continued. My husband and I both have continued that. The great feeling she gave me to introduce me to things and stuff, that's one thing that I've continued with when I deal with young kids. So it's not only
the specific musical legacy,
but it's also this incredible feeling I had that there was a world, and I was in touch with people who, I mean, it was great.
Specifically about her as a teacher and a coach. You've obviously worked with her in both settings. Can you describe just specific things that stand out for you in terms of her teaching style? Specifically, I mean, you've alluded to obviously the fact that she didn't separate teaching from life in general, but
she, I think that what she did with me in her desperation to try and get me to be maybe educated musically, because I always had just played. I saw my very first violin teacher. Her name is Antoinette Corbet, and it was at some Institute of Music for 25 cents a shot. I saw her about 4 years ago, and she's 74. She's still teaching in Red Deer, Alberta. And she told me that I would come to lessons and I'd learn the violin parts, and then if the piano parts were there, I'd learn on the violin the piano part. I just was like, I wanted to just yum up music, you know? And so with Mrs. Eckhart, she had to find a way to teach me that wouldn't squelch, that I wouldn't feel like, well, I have to learn, it takes, 2 years to learn a whole piece. Of course, it takes a lifetime to learn a whole piece. So I remember specifically her drawing things from everyday life and trying to get me to say it's not special that you go and play the violin. You don't do special things with your body. But use what you do every day. And when she talked about, and I still do this. I just finished doing this at the University of Manitoba this last month and at the University of Western Ontario to try and get a beautiful sound is the most important thing. And she believed that and it doesn't matter how much you move around and if you move but a beautiful sound as much to the voice as a beautiful voice. So to hold the bow, I mean, I didn't have a bad bow holder, whatever, but when she was trying to get me to play more complicated things, like I'd never played a Bach fugue before I studied with her, and I don't know if it was inspirational for her, or if she thought about it. She was so busy, I think it was just pure genius as a teacher. But she asked me she brought a big plate in here, into this room, and I put on the piano. She asked me to lift it up. And it was heavy, right? And so I lifted it up like this. You get on the side like this, and she said, okay, take the plate away, turn around. Now, when you hold your bow, it only weighs 50 or 60 grams, and you're manipulating this little, and as opposed to, and then she took me to the piano, and she said, put your hand straight, like perpendicular, and try and lift up that same plate. And yeah, I mean, it was heavy. So right away you start to lift your shoulders, and you use your thumb to lift the weight. And if you put that in the other direction, it means that way you choke the sound of the violin, and it might be intense, but it's really ugly. So that, I remember the plate, and then she said, okay, now pick it up with this hand. Take them away, and now you have to draw from what you do every day, because if you want to play the violin every day, you can't remove yourself from what you do in life to coordinate yourself and what you do automatically. Draw the parallels, and you're not going to pick up something like this because your back gets sore. You're going to pick it, this kind of thing. And making me aware. I can't remember her doing much with my left hand. I really can't. So I had perfect pitch, and I probably could grab the notes okay. So my bow arm needed so much work. Anyway, so I can remember I do remember the first lesson after the first lesson. I don't remember what I played, but I remember her starting with my bow arm. And she had me sit in a chair just like this, and cross my legs as I'm doing now, stick my arm down here, and put my forearm against this chair. And we did exercise. We did it that way, we did it in circles, and we were manipulating the bow. She was trying to get me to feel comfortable with the bow, I think. Anyways. And then we did, she did this with her piano students too, horses' heads, where you have to, this is and she got a picture of a seahorse out for me, the little teeny, right, and you couldn't hold it back, and then you released, and then she'd say, grab air, and right, if you're nice and loose, you can hear, right, but if you're tight, right, so, stuff, things like that I remember specifically, and waves with the bow arm, to make waves. And these are things that I still use, and now that I'm 40 years or 35 years older, I know exactly the principles she was trying to tell me. And actually, I'm glad she didn't start getting into that. I would have said, I just want to play the violin. I don't want to know why. So, but things like that it gives you, she would say to me on one thing on the piano, like this roly thingamajigger, she just said, you remember that, and you'll have a reasonable technique for the rest of your life. Things, and in fact, these things with the bow, it gives, nothing is wrong, but these principles and ideas are just of the highest standard and qualities in the whole world of string playing. You know, so it's those are the things. So we're doing all these exercises. I'm writing them down. I go home, and I used to get up my mom used to wake me up at 6 o'clock or 5:30 during the week to practice, because I had to practice, you know, violin, piano, and then a little singing, and then go to school, and then be ordinary at school. I didn't want my music to, because I mean you know,
to show.
I like, you know, I wanted to be
a
involved in
normal child.
theater and stuff. And anyway, so my mother wakes me up, and I get a chair, and I'm up in my room, and you know, I'm doing all these exercises like this, and she comes in and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, Mrs. Eckhart told me that I have to practice these, you know." And you know, my mom just said, I don't think she means that that's practice time. I think maybe, you know, I mean, my mother being a teacher, and you know, and then another morning I'd be doing these things, and I was reading a book and stuff. So finally she said, "Okay, I'm calling Mrs. Eckhart. This is $15 a week, and you're not even tuning your violin. Something is going wrong, Gwenny." You know, and in fact, yeah, I got caught out, and but she did give me these, and they work, and I, you know, but I just remember that as being funny, you know.
She's reading a novel whilst,
Yeah,
like loosening up her
exactly,
wrist.
exactly.
But it's
Doing all these
practicing.
I can do these and read something, you know, while I'm doing it, and anyways.
Well, I have to interject here because I actually I played violin myself, and I studied in Calgary. Actually, I'm from Alberta, so I
Who did
studied
you
at Mount
study
Royal
with?
College with Diane Valentine, and she played in the Philharmonic and taught at Mount Royal College, and then later on I studied with someone who you might know, Ranald Sheen.
Oh yeah.
From Edmonton.
Oh.
He came down to Calgary
Yeah,
for a couple of years and you know, sort of did the commute. And I studied with him for a couple of years.
His legacy is
Large,
unbelievable.
also, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, he was you know, getting on in years when I was studying
Well, they have
with him.
the Sheen a competition, you know, in
Oh, do
Edmonton
they?
now, and it's just coming up now, the second year for it's 1 year I think it's for piano, the next year it's for violin, and in fact the first competition, which was I think maybe I think it's once every 3 years or something, one of my students won second prize.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he was, I only studied with him for a year or two, but I do have pretty vivid memories. Yeah.
One of his students who was a student of mine, he was a mathematician. He's now principal viola of the Edmonton Symphony. And another boy, he called me, well, he's probably 40-something now, but his name is Mark Lupin. And he was from, his parents lived in Edmonton, and he's now a dermatologist, but he still plays violin and he ended up studying with Mr. Heifetz as well, and I taught him at National Youth Orchestra. So Ranald Sheen has left just a wonderful, wonderful legacy.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember if it was when I was studying with him or prior to him, but just speaking of those practicing games, I had perfected the art of actually watching hockey. I was sort of into hockey. As much as I was into music, I had this other side that liked to watch.
Yeah.
So I can remember on Saturday nights not wanting to miss hockey night in Canada. So I would turn the sound off.
Yeah.
But then have my music stand, which is one of the metal ones, you know, that you can partly sort of see through and don't block everything. And then I had my music, and I'd be doing like my studies, and you know, sort of watching, just out of the corner of my eye, being able to tell if a goal was scored or that kind of thing. As I was still very much concentrating on violin, you know, can do two things at once. And then if a goal was scored or whatever, I could immediately, you know, drop the violin, go, you know, check and get the replay, right? And then okay, great, okay, just keeping tabs.
Well, it does keep your mind going, but
it does. It's mentally stimulating to be practicing whilst, you know, reading a book or watching a program. I just, you look back on those days though and wonder about yourself.
I think we all did it.
I think it's part of the initiation, right?
Yeah.
So now moving on to Sonia. To more, I guess, of her composing persona. She what was your sense of her as a pioneer or trailblazer, I guess might be another word, with respect to promoting not only her own music, but the music of other Canadian women composers, just in a broader sense? Did she talk about that, or sort
well,
of
she
soliloquy about that
can,
at points, or that was?
I can say that she was a real a feminist. I mean, I remember her telling me there is no, the mind is ageless and sexless. I mean, I heard that so many times that I almost believed it. And I know that I remember her friends, the friends that she had, Nancy Noonan, and I think the people that she wrote things for, and some of them, Nancy and Dirk Keith-Basborn, but some of them were composers. So she did have a feeling of camaraderie. But my own personal opinion was that she was living here and she wanted to be part of the community, but I don't think that I don't think she was a true pioneer in pushing for contemporary works. But that, I know it probably can be disputed, and that's just my personal sense. She was certainly, she was desperate to have her works played, and by standards of what was going on as a woman, she did have success, but the intensity of her having the calls she had to make to get commissions and stuff, that's the part that I remember. I mean, she had something, was it the NAC early on, some orchestra commissions, and I remember the work that she had to do to get that. But on the other hand, so did Jean Coulthard, and so did Barbara Pentland, and so did Violet Archer. I mean, thinking of women, just you didn't take women seriously. I mean, it's incredible to think that this was that few years ago. I mean, the Vienna Philharmonic has just allowed its first woman in.
Yeah.
And until curtains were put up for auditions, if you were offered a job in a good orchestra as if you were a woman and unmarried, I mean, you had to be on probation for 5 years. In case you got married, there was nothing like maternity leave, so you had to sit there with your job on the line every year. So if you would get pregnant, I mean, things, we're looking at things a lot differently. And then when I'm talking to my mother's saying, well, I remember when women didn't even vote.
Yeah.
So that question is hard for me to answer, because I want to be honest in my thoughts. And I was never a composer, so I can't really tell. I think that Dr. Eckhardt got the feel of the land much more than she did, as far as what she could do to become accepted and therefore become part of an inner circle that, sort of like Dorothy Parker's Algonquin Club type of thing, I think that his experience dealing with the art gallery and taught him a lot about what he would have to do to get what he wanted in this particular